Good afternoon. In compliance with Chapter 551, Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Friday, May 2nd, 2025 at 1:07 p.m. A quorum of the board is physically present at the Austin ISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. This meeting is being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We are going to go briefly into executive session at the beginning. We'll probably have another at the end. We're going to get some guidance from our legal counsel. So we will now recess the open meeting at 1:07 p.m. 1:08 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071, and we will return shortly to continue our meeting. Thank you. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 1:23 p.m. Superintendent Segura, can you please introduce the item on our agenda?
Yes, President Boswell. I'd like to welcome up Dr. Jacob Reach, Chief of Board Services and Governmental Relations, Dr. Angel Wilson, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary School Leadership, and Brandy Hosick, Chief of Talent Strategy, as well as Secondary. And so as we pull up the presentation, we're going to be having a conversation and sharing with the board and our community information regarding the district turnaround plans for Burnett, Dobie, and Webb. As we move through the presentation, one of the things that we want to make sure is clear is what is included in a turnaround plan. The primary goal of a turnaround plan is to produce significant and sustainable gains in student achievement and move the school towards a C rating within 2 years. One of the things that we've talked about in the past is historically and in years past, when you are receiving accountability year over year, you would have a year to develop a turnaround plan and you would have 2 years to implement. Because of the cadence in the release of 22-23, the expected release of 23-24, and what we expect to receive in August 24-25, we're at a moment where 3 ratings will be released within a 4 or 5 month time frame. One thing to also note is that these turnaround plans by design are intended to have fewer options and have those options be more aggressive. They are really intended to move a school within a short period of time. And lastly, these turnaround plans must be approved by the Texas Education Agency. Some of the requirements within the plans themselves include stakeholder engagement, school improvement strategy, milestones and performance management, and then a commitment to the resources that will be used to support our students and staff. I do want to kind of take a moment here and say that the plans that are submitted to the agency do not include all the details and supports that an agency or a district like AISD would provide. It is what is required, but these plans include so much more than that. And certainly that'll be the case for these turnaround plans that we're talking about today. As we move to the next slide, I want to orient our community to where these schools are. They are north in North Austin. You can see them located there on the map, Burnett, Dobie, and Webb. The number beneath the title of the school, the name of the school, identifies the current enrollment. Burnett 810, Dobie 524, Webb 513. The one thing I want to point out is these schools have very high mobility rates, so that enrollment number does fluctuate week to week, month to month. So if you're asking, why that number has changed from the last couple weeks, that is the reason why. The other thing to note on this slide is just the recognition that Austin ISD's footprint is mostly the same footprint of the city of Austin, and we are geographically oriented north-south, and as many of our community members and staff know, traveling west and east is difficult within the city. As we move forward, a little bit of history regarding the accountability for each of these schools. Slide 5 includes the accountability rating going back from 2018-2019. If we could go to the next slide, please. And there are a couple things to consider when we look at this data set. Orienting our community, the top row includes the years, and then the ratings and different notes on the bottom, which I think are worth a brief discussion. So between 2018 and 2019, the system changed when you moved to an A through F accountability, and those went into effect in 2019. And so looking back, what it really is a catalyst for the turnaround plans, it goes back to 2018, 2019, before the pandemic. As you move along, we have the series of not rateds, which was a reflection of what was happening in the public education system by way of the pandemic for 2020 and 2021, and that's noted by the NAs. And then in 2022, there was SB 1365, which was passed, which stated that if a school had an accountability rating of an A or B or C that could be used to break an accountability chain, that could be considered within that school's kind of accountability chain. In this case, Dobie received a 59, and so for our purposes of counting years, 2022 does not count. 2023 was just released on April 24th, and we received at that point guidance on the submission of turnaround plans, and that effectively counts as year 2 of the second consecutive year the second year of an F rating. 2024 has not been released, but we do have the data, and we have submitted it to TEA for verification. So we do know that at some point in the near future, a additional F will be applied to the accountability chain for Dobie, making the 3rd year. And then 2025 is projected. We certainly recognize that that is this current year. I do want to note that there's been a lot of work at these schools, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But this is a conservative projection. By design, they need to be conservative. We want to make sure that anything that we put forward communicates, effectively the potential worst outcome. So certainly want to recognize that 24 has not been released. So formally, it's not part of the accountability chain, though we know that it will come. And 2025 is a slightly conservative projection. Next slide shows the history of Webb. Very similar, going back to 2018, 2019. In 2018, Webb met standard. 2019, they received their first F, which is the first year of the A through F ratings. And similar to Dobie, 2020, 2021, and 2022, there was no rating applied to the school. And then 2023, they received effectively their second F. Again, that accountability rating was just released a couple weeks back. 2024, as I just mentioned, is we have the information. It's been verified. We know that the 2024 will result in an F for Webb. And for projection purposes, as I just stated, we are tracking 2025. And again, there's been a lot of growth, internal projections based on MAP. We've actually seen Webb pull out of federal accountability. So there is movement occurring for sure. But based on current projections, slightly conservative, we do have 2025 projected as an F. Next slide shows the history of Burnett Middle School. Very similar trend, where in 2018 we Burnett met standard. 2019 was the first F. We have 3 consecutive years of a no rating, and then the second F being applied in 2023. 2024, we also have verified that Burnett will receive an F, and then 2025, the projection is an F as well. Again, want to point out that we have seen we've seen growth certainly in lots of areas, but we do not have it being enough to move to a different letter grade. As we move to the next slide, I do want to point out timeline. Once the 2023 ratings were released, TEA communicated to the district that the turnaround plans for these schools would be required to be submitted no later than June 30th of 2025. One thing to point out, as I mentioned just a couple moments ago, typically you would have a year to build out a turnaround plan. In this case, though we've been thinking about all of the work, it is a much tighter timeline. We're in multiple months, not a year, of planning to get to a plan that we believe will be accepted by the agency. So we know that in May we have this meeting, and then we have an information session here next week. We'll provide updates to the board. We'll have a series of communication and engagement opportunities with our staff and with our communities. We will look to bring back potential vote on the turnaround plans on June 12th. And again, we still have a little bit of a buffer since the actual last day is June 30th. I do want to point out that this adjustment over the last week has made us kind of rethink some of these timelines. One thing to point out is on the 8th of May, we had this initially wanted to bring forward recommended turnaround plans. Now we're going to discuss them. A couple of communication engagement opportunities this past week were not able to be completed, and so we want to make sure that we go through the process in a way that is responsive to our community, certainly responsive to TEA. So there will be some adjustments in this, but clearly wanted to note that with the asterisks. As we move to the next slide, I think it's really important that we talk about, well, what options are actually available to school districts? There are 6. They're identified. You can look them up, but here is a summary of them. There is a school improvement turnaround option, the district restart, the district managed restart, a partner managed restart, a new school district managed, a new school partner managed, and then a reassign. You can see here the summary of each of them, and one thing that I want to point out is some of these are not available to us. If we go to the next slide, and they're not available to us primarily as a function of time. The ability to restart a school, identify a technical partner, and move through the staffing, the curriculum development is not something that we can accomplish within the window that we have, and we know that there is consensus from the agency that those are not viable options at this moment. The one on the far left, school improvement, this is one that is not as, I would use the word aggressive as a restart. We essentially use this option when we pursued the LASSO grant several months back in February. At that time, AISD's application was not funded, mainly in part because it was viewed that that school improvement action was not going to be what was required to actually move the school from a failing rating to a C or a better. So we do not believe, based on feedback that we've gotten from the agency, that the school improvement model would be accepted. In fact, I'm very certain that it would not be. So what that leaves are 3 options available to AISD. The first is the district managed restart. In this instance, the AISD would move and essentially restart the campus using an ACE model or something similar. There are lots of different ways that we can build this and make it AISD's own. Multiple school districts throughout the state have different variations of this. But effectively what we'd be doing is identifying new academic staff and leadership. We'd have to commit to the 5 leaders, the 5 pillars within the ACE framework. You can see them below: strategic staffing, instructional excellence, extended day, SEL, and community and parent partnerships. This would allow AISD to maintain majority of staff. We would have to go through an evaluation process, but when we think about core instruction, that is the focus of the assignment of new staff. So when you think about food service workers, you think about non-core instruction, you think about fine arts, athletics, all of those things, those would not necessarily or would not go through this process. Moving over to the right, we have the partner-managed restart. This is effectively what we've called and have come to call 1882 partnerships, and we'll get into kind of the details of what that is later. But effectively what this is having a partner come in and manage the operations of the school on behalf of AISD. In this instance, they have the autonomy and there is really zero opportunity for AISD to inform the instructional plan, but there are things that could be negotiated. And we have seen examples elsewhere in the state where negotiations have been successful and elements that the district would like to see continue on. But effectively, all staff would become employees of that partner. And in instances where there were classified staff within food service or transportation, we may see an agreement where we provide those services, but it would be by way of an agreement. And then on the far right, you see reassign. This is effectively closing the low-performing campus and reassigning students. The idea here is those students would go into a new school environment, and we would track those students over the course of as many years as necessary. But the receiving school does have to be a high-performing school, an A or a B school. And after that year, the accountability rating of the blended school would then be applied to, in this case, Dobie, Burnett, or Webb. And that would thereby break the accountability chain. So those are the three options that we have effectively available to us. Again, some of them are a function of time. Some of them are a function of what we believe the agency would or would not accept. The one thing I also want to point out, because over the last couple of weeks, we've had lots of conversations around resources, what has been occurring in Austin ISD, and I want our community and our families and our staff to know that we have been working very hard. If we move to the next slide, please. And this is work that we've started together as an administration, as a board, back in the spring of 2023. And so when we think about just what that work looks like, I really wanted to kind of distill it down to some main points. We talk about inputs and outputs and the fact that having our educators in the classroom is the unit of change. We've made that a priority. We focused on it, and we're staffed at over 97%. Retention rates. You can't build up these campuses and have that collaborative working environment unless teachers stay. And so the investments that we've made in compensation in 23 and 24 have really seen us move these retention rates in the right direction, and they've increased over 20%. Even back in spring of 2023, we had a difficult conversation here on the dais. I remember Trustee Hunter talking about the need to really think through and build out curriculum, starting with K1 and 2. There was a time when we didn't have consumables for our elementary school students, and so we made an investment at that time to start that process. It was really when we first came together. We expanded instructional coaches in the fall of 2023. We established minimums for smaller campuses. That was a decision that we made, and that was an investment. We knew that if you are only going to staff based on student enrollment, some of our schools that serve historically underserved student groups are not going to be able to get that third AP, or maybe not going to get that second counselor when we know there's a significant need. So what we did as an administration, which is supported by the board and required an investment, was creating that floor. We also, in the spring of 2024, established the Support and Resource Index, acknowledging that different schools need different things. We built that out, we shared it with principals, and now every division within Austin ISD understands the way that we track work orders, the way that we track professional development, the investments, all of those things have to be prioritized in a way that reflects student need, and having that shared understanding is something that took some time but is now in place. The board adopted a new scorecard. I think that's worth noting. There's a lot of work, community engagement that went into that, and from that comes our long-term plans. The thing that I also want to reinforce is the MTSS reform and relaunch effectively. Multi-tiered systems of support, understanding where our students are, what does Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions need to be across the entire system, and acknowledging that there are schools that have disproportionate numbers receiving Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, or students that are identified, and we don't have the resources currently to get them back on grade level, which is what was a catalyst for us investing by way of the tax rate election for content interventionists. Along the way, we also had a focus on reducing chronic absenteeism. Again, tied back to the scorecard, you can see it's reduced 7% across the system. And then attendance, if our students are in school, we know that that'll be a benefit, and we've seen that increase as a system by 1.5%, and you can see what that looks like school by school here as well. I also want to point out that the team has been very strategic in providing coaching opportunities, professional development opportunities for our leaders in these campuses, as well as other Title I campus or campuses that just have additional needs. There's a couple of those identified or seen below. These are investments that we brought forward and that the board supported, and certainly want to kind of tie it all back together that this is not something that we're just starting today. It's difficult work, but we have been thinking through it and making strategic investments over the last 18 to 24 months. So the next slide is an example of what this looks like. Principal De La Cruz, the Burnett principal, shared with us a couple days ago when we were visiting this campus a couple slides that I think are worth kind of sharing with our board. What does it look like when you have these system level improvements or investments at a campus? And this is Burnett, one of the campuses that we're talking about today as part of a turnaround plan. And what I think is really important to note here is just the investment within Burnett when it comes to staffing. Some of it is a function of just creative staffing. Some of it is the decisions that we made here as a board. But you can see campus by campus what this looks like. Certainly, hiring a principal, is incredibly important. There were years back when we didn't have the ability to have. There wasn't an endless supply of leaders, and so we focused on leaders that knew our community, understood, but what was needed. But we knew that it was going to take time. So we made those decisions, and you'll see in the data and the KPIs in the back that these leaders are newer to the role, but certainly not new to the community or new to AISD. You can see the progression in assistant principals, instructional coaches, department chairs, the academic dean, and then the project specialists. And certainly, as part of the turnaround plan, this will be evaluated and expanded upon as well. And the other thing I think is also important to note as we move to the next slide is that we value climate and culture. We want our students to have a full experience. And when you think about having that full experience across these schools or any other school, it's important to note, what is the role of these other programs that we know bring students to school? And I think it's important to talk about just the sheer increase that we've seen across these schools. I know I would not have graduated if it wasn't for athletics, that's for sure. And when you see numbers like this, you know that things are moving. It's just that time is not on our side, and we need to go. We need to be more aggressive, and that's really, I think, at the end of the day, what this is intended to do. But I also want to say and communicate that we have been working, our principals have been working, our staff have been working. It's just a different strategy moving forward. So as we move into the next set of slides, I do want to do a little bit deeper dive into the analysis that we go through when we consider different options. I'll start with the reassignment option. We always think about student disruption. Students we want them to have a full experience, but we also know when you break up schools, you're breaking up friends, you're breaking up, brothers and sisters. And so our preference is almost always going to be to keep cohorts together. And it's challenging to do just because of how large our schools are, but it's something that we really, really think through. We think about family disruption. Different school communities have different methods of transportation or modal needs, and it's important that we acknowledge that in certain parts of town you don't have access to vehicles in the ways that you would in other parts of town. And one of the reasons we know this is because when we look at swing space solutions, we spend a lot of time working with our families that are no longer going to be able to walk to the school to be with their student after school or at to see fine arts programming or even to go and respond to an emergency. Now we have to think through, even though it's 6 or 7 blocks over, it's a different kind of pressure we're putting onto families, and we think about that and we analyze it. We think about facility, program preservation. Are we able to keep the same academic programming in the school, what supports are needed if they're at the receiving school, contingency planning. If there isn't a solution that actually works, what are our options? And, are there ways to kind of, break this up, either by student group, by cohort, or by area? And then I think it's always important to note that, these moves take time. You have to plan them out, and we are not the only entity that has a part in getting these approved. The City of Austin, the permitting process does take time. Now, we do this all the time. We have agreements in place with the city, just given our footprint and the sheer amount of movement that we do on an annual basis, whether it's construction, swing space solutions, or anything else. We are confident that we can hit timelines once we put them out there. But it is important to note that every week loss or every month loss does make it more difficult, and at some point you get to a place where it's no longer viable. And then also cost, right? Every one of these decisions has a cost, but when you think about portables or expansion of egress or access requirements, or you think about just planning, design, all those things are part of the analysis. So just wanted to talk about that briefly. And as you move to the next slide, we know that a reassignment has to be at an A or B school. There are more A or B schools than are listed here, but those are south of the river and are unreasonable for all intents and purposes. O'Henry is just north, but these would satisfy at least the first four from left to right. So you can see here, just based on miles, where the schools for the turnarounds are in relation in distance to the schools that would satisfy the turnaround requirement per TEA. I do want to point out General Marshall. It has come up in multiple conversations. The thing to point out here is that General Marshall is a new school and does not have an accountability rating. And so we know performance. The agency knows the performance. There is not a rating, so it does not satisfy kind of cleanly the A or B receival kind of aspect of the turnaround plan. But did want to point it up here in case anybody is asking. So you can see there from left to right, Lamar Middle School, Murchison Middle School, Keeling, and O'Henry, the utilization of those buildings and those campuses. And again, just acknowledging that movement east and west, north and south is very challenging for really everybody, but certainly those families that have multiple obligations. Moving on to the next slide, diving deeper down into 1882 partnership option, effectively restarting with a partner. Because of where we are, it's important to note that we have to have a partner that will be approved. This is true whether we have a year to plan or we have 3 months to plan. TEA must approve this partner. One of the reasons that is also it's also important is because that partnership comes with benefits. And if we don't have an approved partner, we will not get those benefits. The one most notable is a 2-year accountability pause. You effectively get time to onboard that partner, the partner to implement their program, and then you get some time to see it build up and ultimately give them time to get to a point where they can meet accountability. Additionally, the 1882 partnership allows for additional grant funding, and then it also does come with some funds from the state. So there are some kind of financial benefits to doing this from a cost perspective, but I also want to point out that what really just transitions to them is the average daily attendance kind of offset that we receive is just a flow through to the partner, and then we develop a contract to kind of pay back those other operational expenses, whether it's food service or transportation or grounds. And we have done this, and this is something that we're familiar with. The opportunity for a new partner, because we are looking at an implementation in 25-26, would require us submitting it to TEA, and the approval windows have closed. TEA has 2 approval windows, one in late fall and one in the spring semester. Those have already passed. They passed before we received the guidelines on 25-26. And so we would not be able to introduce a new partner that isn't already pre-approved. I do want to point out that we can negotiate. If there are things that we would want to see our partner do, or things that we want to make sure are considered, we have the ability to do that. The one thing that is important, however, is that the instructional model is not negotiable. We do not have the ability to influence that. It really stays on its own, but many other elements of that partnership can be negotiated. And so when you think through who currently has been pre-approved, who could meet the timeline, and based on what we just described, there are a couple, and you see them listed here. The main kind of differentiator being that the partner has to have demonstrated previous turnaround experience and have been successful doing it, and a history of meeting state accountability standards. So those two being Third Future and Democracy Prep. It's also important to note that any other Subchapter D charter that is in good standing also qualifies. We would have to go through and determine whether the turnaround experience and proven turnaround experience would be accepted upon evaluation. So it's lots of groups, lots of entities, but we would have to really get into it to determine whether that would be accepted or not. So as we move into the restart option, it's important to note that there are 5 levers. 1 and 2 here have been combined, but it's strong leadership, strategic staffing, high quality instructional materials and assessments, effective instruction, and then positive school culture. And each of these is a component, ends up being an elaborate plan with milestones and schedules. Upon acceptance, we would report back, with the agency, kind of our progression in those various plans. And we do have opportunities to do it our way. There's external partners to help with positive school culture, or if it's kind of our approach to the strategic staffing, there is some refinement in here. And I think that's where the ACE model kind of, there is an ACE model, but there are other models that also work. There are elements within them that we could build out and make our own, and we certainly have thought through much of that, if not most of it. So one example of what that could look like, if you go to the next slide, please, is what our technical partner, once on board, and the agency would expect to see. And this would really be in an effort to attract staff, enter into agreements with these staff to ensure that the expectations that we are asking for and are saying we will adhere to in the turnaround plan are met. And so what you have here is kind of a different, maybe like I would say an outline of a potential staffing model. There's variation within them. You've seen different ones be done around the state that kind of oscillate, whether it's principal compensation, assistant principal, counselors, instructional staff, non-core and librarians. But really what we're doing is saying, okay, we're going to compensate these positions differently. There's going to be different expectations. We're going to have an agreement with this individual, and then we're going to monitor that progress over the course of the year. I also want to point out that this does not necessarily include the full complement of additional staff that may be necessary to support the plans. And once we get into directionally where we need to go and the technical partners on board, we will be able to say, okay, we're going to add 4 additional FTEs or teaching positions in core instruction, or we're going to add in their parent support specialists, or we're going to add this position. We have built them out, but until we have the technical partner in place, we didn't want to share kind of the details of that because they'll help inform the final solution. So all that being considered, as we move to the next slide, there are really 2 paths that I see available to Austin ISD at this time. Path A, Austin Independent School District restart with an 1882 option/contingency. And so I'm going to kind of get into why we wrote it that way, but effectively as we go through the slides, what we're saying is, we would restart the campus. Again, this tool could be applied to any one of the schools or all 3. It's agnostic. It really can be how we choose to deploy it. But as you move to the next slide, what we would do is we would identify the technical partner for a restart. We would work with community to communicate what is in the restart, come back to the board and discuss this coming Thursday and certainly the week after what that looks like. We would build out and begin to think through and update the curriculum. That has to occur now. We know there's going to be a tightening of curriculum, so we need to do that work now and get far enough ahead. Perhaps it's 9 weeks and deploy those resources immediately. One of the things that we know is going to occur in the month of May is that STAR 3 through 8 early results will be received. That will help us calculate domain 1. We move into June. We'll get on June 12th STAR 3 through 8, and we will be able to calculate all domain scores. Again, this milestone provides more certainty in that column that's furthest to the right that is currently projected F. So at that moment, we'll know, is the F more likely, less likely, or are we actually moving towards a D? And again, Ds are important because that provides a 1-year pause, right? And again, this is the approach that we're taking is conservative, so that data point helps us really understand kind of the path forward at that point. We would come back on the 12th. On the 12th, we would be able to submit the approved turnaround plan to the board. We would submit it to the agency shortly thereafter on the 16th. Again, by this time, we're already moving forward with hiring. We're already moving forward with all the things necessary to launch the 25-26 school year. The master schedule, recruitment, staff transitions. Those staff that are not able to remain at these schools, we certainly want them to remain AISD employees. Brandy Hosick has been working and developing those plans, has had initial conversations. We want our staff to know that they are needed and they're wanted, and we are going to support them in this transition. The last day to submit, though this is not my expectation, is June 30th. And the one thing that I want to point out, make very, very clear, is that TA has communicated to us that as soon as we provide these plans, they will review them, provide feedback to us within 3 weeks. That's important because every time we lose time to review, we're not taking action and actually progressing the plans. So it's really important that whatever we submit is likely, highly likely, almost expected to be accepted. Next slide, please. So in July, the intensive planning for campus instructional staff, everybody's on board. We're taking them through the details of the work. You see in here throughout these next couple slides, different milestones as an end of. So on July 18th, TEA would notify us of approval or resubmission. Again, that is based on the 3 weeks timeline. So we want to know early. If it's a no, we want to know early. In August, we would receive the 24-25 accountability. We would have it, and then a week later, we would release to our school communities. The big milestone here, and this is where this plan is different than maybe just a traditional restart, we would be looking to release an RFP for 18-2 partners for 26-27. We would release that procurement in August. We would work with our communities, with our staff, get input from the board as to the elements of it, release it to the market. I always say market, release it to the community. And then different partners would be able to propose on serving as the partner for these schools. We want to make sure that procurement is structured in a way that communicates that we may not exercise it, but it is something that is available to us and, in fact, could be applied to any one of the schools. And so we would release at that point. In September, really through the remainder of the fall semester, we'd be monitoring, using assessments, moving towards October. And again, on October 1st, you see here, TA corresponds to AISD final approval rejection for revised turnaround plan. I don't expect that to be the case. We'll be way ahead of it. But in case we hit the back of every single milestone, that would be the final date. If we're at that point and we don't have an approved plan, we have not done our job. October 13th through 17th, Fall Star interim assessments will be administered, and then we will use that data to inform the next step in the work. Next slide, Jacob. So December 1st, campus administers release star tests to all students. Again, these are the questions from 24-25. We were analyzing on December 5th. We are at a point where all the information we collected through the fall semester will tell a story. We will have a good indication whether the work that we have done is moving the system far enough, moving our schools far enough to improve accountability. And in the event that it is not moving, we will have the ability to exercise the right to enter into an 8-2 partnership. We understand that the expectation from the agency is that we would hit that priority window, which is December 12th. I think there's some variation. It changes year over year, but generally speaking, it's around that date. And so, again, this timeline applies to all. So conceivably, 2 schools we could be monitoring over the fall semester, recognize that movement is what we expect it to be. Perhaps they receive even a D letter grade. And at that point, for perhaps 2 of the schools, or maybe all 3 schools, or 1 of the schools, we would continue on. And for the ones that we didn't feel were going to be able to make accountability, we would exercise the ability to pursue an 8-2 partnership. And what that would allow us to do in January and March is pursue LASSO grants and kind of move forward with the onboarding of that partner for whichever school it may be identified for. The main thing here is that for this to work, we have to identify the partner, enter into an agreement, and have that agreement be active prior to STAR 25-26 being administered. And so you can see here, those are the dates in April 7th through 14th, 14th through 21st, and then 21st through 28th, and then May 4th through 22nd, you'll see the spring map growth. And so what this allows us to do when we think about an overall strategy, and this is something that I think the board is asked the administration to do, is to think logically and strategically around what path allows us to invest in Austin ISD, maintains the school at the current location, and if necessary, next slide, and if necessary, allows us to enter into an 8-2 partnership. The reason the 8-2 partnership is important and why it's a contingency option is because of the 2-year pause. So effectively what would happen is the 25-26 school year would be pause year 1, 26-27 would be pause year 2, and then the make or break year would be 27-28. And so if state intervention would be required, assuming the partner was not able to be successful and everything that we did on our end wasn't successful, then that action would come in the 28-29 school year. So this is a blending of different strategies in order to meet the needs that we've heard from our community, from our board, one that we know that we believe has a high probability of being accepted by the agency. If you move to the next slide, this is the pathway for an 8-2 partnership. It's simpler, not as long, fewer steps. So we would effectively begin immediate negotiations with a pre-approved 8-2 partner. We would work over the month of May to negotiate what AISD expects in that partnership. Again, the instructional model is not something we'd be able to negotiate, but many other things we'd be able to. We would be looking to finalize that contract in late May, early June, bring it to the board for approval, and then use the summer to onboard that partner and move through the model with them so that they have a successful launch in 25-26. And so my hope is that this presentation kind of outlined the logic, the strategy, the kind of different data sets that are pulling, that are being brought into the overall analysis. I will tell you that every one of these has multiple scenarios, and if this, then this. I've heard about, obviously, HB4. I've heard about, so many different things. The challenge we have is, we can't control this. There are many other things that we cannot control, and every time we go and reach for one of those, it adds a probability of success or failure that is hard to quantify. But this we can, And this gives us a path through. And let's not forget that we still have a lot of work to do in overall improvement elsewhere in the district. And we do not have certainty when 23-24 is going to be released, but we can't assume that it won't be. So with that, I will pause and answer any questions the board may have, and certainly the team here will be able to as well. And just for our community, we did have questions from the trustees that we received the last couple days, and so there's details in them, and we'll make those available as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Trustees, just for awareness, we're 44 minutes into our conversation, and just be aware. So do we have questions? Trustee Singh.
Thank you for this presentation. I can see a lot of work has been going into what we do for our district and for our students. One question I have is around the finances of this. I think if we don't talk about the finances, then we're only having half the conversation. And, considering that, the presentation we had last week, I think it's really important for us to think about the cost difference between the different options.
Yeah, so in one of the questions that the trustees asked, we provided some kind of breakdown information. I think it's important to note that what we're providing at this time is going to be a little conservative, but we have broken down the staffing allocations per campus. So if we were to implement our own restart at these schools, we're looking at a $1.7 million cost per year. I do want to point out that that does not include any successful, LASSO grant application, which we think we would be successful. It does not include TA providing additional support. Jacob has been having conversations with TA, and I think every time he's on the phone, he's asking about additional dollars. So it'd be 1.7, and that does include a pretty conservative kind of structure. It does include the stipends. It includes additional allocations. I was hesitant to put the details because the details would actually reflect the plan, and we don't want the plan to be finalized until the technical partner comes on board. But about 1.7 million per campus. And then when you think about the move, the one that's probably most salient in people's minds is the Dobie to Lamar cost of just portables, being between $4.5 to $6 million. And that's just one. So other moves would obviously have that cost or similar costs. At this point, we wouldn't even be able to do that. It'd have to be a school that can absorb them fully, just because of where we are in the procurement process as well as permitting. And then when it comes to the 1882 partnership, that is probably the smallest amount. Mainly because the 1882 partner will receive funds from the agency to actually do some of the things that we'd be having to pay out of pocket to do, like the stipends. And so they, by being the partner, they would actually receive the funds to pay those higher salaries.
So do we have a sense of how much it could cost us compared to the 1.7?
For the AT&T partner? I don't, Jacob, if you have a sense for, it's going to be minimal.
There'd be no additional cost to the district for an 1882 partner. It would just be a pass-through of the 1882 funds. Yep. There is an increase. It depends on the students, but it'd be somewhere between $700 to $1,000 additional per student.
Okay. And the other question I had was around the feasibility of doing a restart, our own restart, as you've described, thinking about all the staffing changes that we have all the staffing positions we have to fill. As I read through the trustee Q&A, there were some very specific requirements around having principals who have had turnaround proof of turning around schools. I don't know if we have any in our district right now, and how much. Maybe we do, but the way TEA would define it, yeah. Right? And then in terms of hiring the staff and thinking about the whole ecosystem as a district, because anything that we do, like even that 1.7 additional cost, I want us to really be thinking about, okay, we're also making budget cuts right now. We all saw the presentation last week where it showed that we were going to basically, be bankrupt in 2 years if we don't make dramatic changes. That's kind of the way I would interpret it, although I know there's a lot of assumptions in there, but still, like, I want us to be really go into any decision we make, knowing that any additional investment in this community, which is worth it, but we have to then not fight that, we can't fight you guys on everything for cuts going forward if there are cuts related to things that we also hold dear. So I'm just putting a little reality check on some of this.
Yeah, so on the first question, Brandy and I and the team have had lots of conversations around our ability to execute this plan. We will execute it. I'm confident we'll execute it. When you think about the number of staff or the number of positions, it's not an insurmountable amount given how much we do every year. So Brandy can certainly speak to kind of our capability in staffing these positions. Yes, that's why the stipends matter. We have to attract those to these positions that have that experience that are maybe elsewhere in the district or maybe even outside the district currently. We do have people that have experience within Austin ISD with turnaround work, that is for sure, and also bringing them back into Austin ISD in leadership positions to ensure that it's done well and with fidelity to the plan. When it comes to costs, absolutely. I think everything we do, we are constantly thinking about the costs associated with it, and certainly 1.7 is not something that is a small amount. But your point is the point that I think our community and our board, need to hear, at least from the administration, that, we're entering a period where we're going to make even more cuts. And so these are costs that we're going to have to find elsewhere. And there's not a lot of things that we can find these costs in, which means the cuts are going to have to be slightly deeper. As a function of scale, 1.7 million in a $1 billion budget, not huge, but what we found, as y'all have seen, when you're honest about your budget, the numbers stack up quickly. So no, your point is well taken. But I hope that what we've provided you gives you an idea of scale, right? So 1882 partnership, very, very low, 1.7 per school for restart. And then, you're looking probably between 3.5 to 5, for 2 of the schools. One thing I want to point out is the move solution for Burnett is going to be very, very difficult, the reassignment, just because of its size. Burnett Middle School is over 800 students. It's not, and you can't do all 3, right? Like, there just aren't enough. The movement and the mobility in the city just doesn't allow for it. So effectively, you can't do that across all 3. Which is why a comprehensive plan is what's needed, which is what the agency's allowed us to do at this point. So I just want to make that point as well.
President Boswell, do I have time for one more? Okay, thank you. So one last question is regarding if we do our own restart, I just want to be clear. So would we have 1 year or 2 years of doing it kind of like on our own before we would have to we might need to bring in a charter provider?
Yeah. So we would have less than 1 year, really.
Okay.
Because as the timeline said, yeah. So we would, again, what we would know by 25-26 start is how they did in 24-25.
Okay.
That's a huge data point. And then in 25-26, we'd be implementing our plan. We'd be understanding the progression of our students, and there will be a lot of information to pull from to determine whether we believe the campus and whether our students are going to move accountability. So you don't get a full year.
Okay, so we would have to make a decision. I just want to make this point really clear for the public, is we would have to make a decision on whether or not to hire a charter school before we even got our STAR results for the next school year.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, so I can't really imagine any situation, to be honest, that we wouldn't proceed with the charter school. Because even if the kids got perfect on all their maps during the next school year, right? We would still be counting on this small group of kids to do really well on the STAR to save the whole district. essentially is what we're saying. If we don't, if we were, you know what I'm saying? It's like, take me to like, April or March of 2026. Would we actually take that much of a risk for any school?
Oh, so again, I think there's multiple milestones between now and then that will give you information as to whether there's a high probability or a low probability. Is it going to be zero? No. I mean, I think that I don't think there's a scenario in which you totally, you 100% can guarantee in December that you will meet accountability in April or May. That doesn't exist. So this is why the technical partner matters. This is why working with TA matters. This is why, if we have the plan, we have the assessments, and we all agree that if we do these things and we're seeing the growth, then you would expect it to be true. But again, nothing's guaranteed. So your point is well taken, and it is true.
So if there's a scenario that, like, let's say in March of next year, the kids have been doing great on all the map testing, everything we're doing is working out. Can you all imagine a scenario that we would actually say, okay, we're going to continue betting on ourselves. We're going to forego a charter option. Yeah. And if the kids don't do well on the STAR, would we get possibly taken over as a whole district at that point?
So,
like, is that an option that TEA could exercise?
Yeah. So the first question, first part of the two-part question. Yes, 100%. I think that there's an acknowledgement by staff, I think by the agency, by lots of people, that if we do this work and we adhere to it, we will move to a point where the takeover risk or the installation of a board of managers or intervention risk goes way down because accountability is moved. So I feel confident in that, assuming that we can do the work. I think that's the other thing. Like we have to be able to do the work, whether if it's hiring or if it's procurement, like all of these steps that are outlined in this document, we would need the ability to do it and move through it and hit these milestones. If there are barriers or if there are things that come up that impede our work, then I think that the risk goes way up. And so So the second part of the question is in March or April. You asked, if the students do not meet accountability, what is the action? Well, if they don't make an F, they make an F, right? So the fifth consecutive F. At that point, assuming 24 gets released, and assuming they don't get a D, there's a lot of assumptions, but assuming those things don't happen, then the commissioner shall take an action, closure of the school, or installation of a board of managers. I would say that I think if we do all the plans and we do it with fidelity and we're coordinating with the agency, I would hope that the action is one that acknowledges the work that we put into the plan, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. Trustee Foster.
Jacob, anything you want to add to that? All right. I feel like somebody wants to say something now.
So as the board provides vision and the administration executes, when you talk about, can you go to slide 12? When you talk about investing in not only Dobie, but Burnett and Webb and all of our high needs middle schools, and acknowledging the percentage of English language learners, typically around 80% in many of these schools, high student mobility, high eco-dis, often close to a third of the students being newcomers, and you come with an option that has you kind of double down in your investment, and then you demonstrate to the board and the community the way the investment in these schools has been ramping up. I sort of stand in a sort of position of appreciation for that. I'm really excited about the extent to which investments in our middle schools has paid off. It hasn't shown up in an accountability system that just doesn't reflect what I see when I visit our campuses. I see growth in programming. I see kids excited. I see healthy communities. So I want to, I guess, acknowledge the investment and acknowledge the growth that we've seen, even as somebody else wants to put a label on our schools and our performance. That said, here we are. The idea of a turnaround that you present makes a lot of sense to me. And I also want to understand how this fits into the district as a whole and as a complete ecosystem. Distribution of years of teaching experience across the district matters. Distribution, so what's going on in this school and that school and that school in terms of our teacher core matters. And so it's not just about 3 middle schools, and it's not even just about the elementaries that feed those middle schools, it's about the whole system. So I really hope to understand clearly something about how this is a horizontal piece of work that's district-wide as opposed to simply vertical. And then right as a corollary to that, I would offer the possibility that we need to think about that in terms of the distribution of our students as well. I am all for, because our community wants it, kids want to be at Dobie. The families want to be at Dobie, and so I am all for that. And so that has me not as excited about distributing kids here, there, hither, and yon, but it also has me backing up and asking questions about how we do applications across the district and how we have systems set up so that a certain sliver of our kids leave their home community to go to somewhere all the way across town. I'm not seeing these two pieces yet as a part of the conversation. And I think they're probably there, or they may be there, but I would love a little more clarity on that.
Good evening. Good afternoon. Thank you for raising that concern forward. And I know that at our last board meeting, Trustee Foster, you spoke to wanting to see the horizontal changes as well as vertical changes. And both of those pieces of alignment are a part of the plan that we're doing. Not just the turnaround plan for the 3 schools, Dobie, Burnett, and Webb in question, but systemic changes to support and impact the system as a whole. So when we think about curriculum, for instance, secondary curriculum or multilingual supports, these are not supports that we're just planning for these 3 schools. These are supports we're planning for all schools. The curriculum is a curriculum that every school uses, no matter the rating, no matter the letter grade, or where they stand in the accountability system. And when we look at the variation or distribution of where our English language learner students are, that's going to be at every campus. When we look at our students receiving special education services, that will be at every campus. So we are planning strategically and intensively for the schools that we are talking about today, which is Dobie, Burnett, and Webb. But as far as curriculum changes, support with multilingual supports, staffing, different things of that nature, that impacts everyone. Professional development opportunities, opportunities for more practices with teachers, with sheltered instruction. When we think about Solution Tree PLC, I know that was something that was identified on one of the previous slides, but we have almost maybe 2/3 or even more of our secondary campuses, and I'm pretty sure elementary as well, that have attended this Solution Tree PLC. We started off prioritizing which campuses would attend first in cohorts, and this has been going on for the past 2 or 3 years. So we are speaking to true comprehensive systemic changes of support in order to be able to strengthen the bandwidth of campuses within Austin ISD.
I think the other thing I would add, Trustee Foster, is that we're going to have to reconfigure ourselves, and we've already started that work. There's an acknowledgement here that there's real work to get done. There's great things happening, but there's a lot of work that needs to get done. And the environment that we're operating in is not going away. So we have to think differently. We have to acknowledge that there are constraints on the system from a budget perspective. And I think that it's important to talk about that we are about to encounter, or I would say go through 2 really difficult things, right? Accountability and consolidations or further budget reductions. And what I don't want to do is to remove resources from schools. We want to push resources into schools. And back to Trustee Singh's comment, we're going to have difficult conversations as we move forward. But at the end of the day, like what you want is what we want. And it cannot be vertical. Everything has to be considered, but there's only so much that we can take on at any given moment. Because we're going to be taking on, boundary conversations with consolidations. We're going to be taking on these other heavy things as well. So they're all complementary, and my hope is that we've done so much in a relatively short period of time, and if we can get through, really the next 9 to 10 months I think we're going to be in a much better place than we are now.
I appreciate that deeply, and I appreciate the thoughtful work that's going on. We didn't really talk too much about the student side of it. So, for instance, if you have schools where kids are going through a very rigorous application system that only accepts some, and then that school is designated as excellent, when the kids came in excellent and they leave excellent, it's like, okay, good, you're doing your job, and that's great. And I'm wondering why a school isn't a pure lottery, why it isn't configured slightly differently in terms of what students get the opportunity to appreciate some of what we do in our amazing campuses. So we don't have time today, I understand that, but I deeply believe and understand that just as we want a distribution with our teachers, there's some questions and answers and hard work to be done with regards to the distribution of our students. Final thing I'll say just really quickly is just an ask. Community is just on us right now. I love it, and they want answers, and they want to know where we are. So at the end of our day today, if we just have crisp, powerful communication possible as to exactly where we're going, so that I can answer the thousands of emails with here's the plan. So just a request on the communication front in terms of hitting this hard ASAP.
Yep. No, we hear you, and all that's drafted. Not what, but they're ready to go once we were there.
Thank you. Trustee Kaufman.
This is more of a quick statement, but I just want to be crystal clear that from my own opinion and from the discussions we've had as a board, there is no scenario ever where we would say that it's the responsibility of our kids to pass a test in order to save the district. That there is no scenario where this is on the backs of our kids to say that this is their responsibility or this is their fault. It is solely the adults' responsibility in this district to get it right for our kids, to provide them the education they need to be successful for life and career, and for that to reflect on these recently changed state examinations. And so whatever we say or do on this dais, or whatever our administration says or does, I hope nobody, especially the kids, interprets it that way. But given what Trustee Singh brought up, I would be very concerned if we found ourselves in a situation where, for whatever reason, that's what the students feel, where they feel that they're walking into a test and it's like, you know what, if I don't pass this test, they're going to close our district down. So whatever we can do to prevent that perception from happening, or our kids to be put in that situation where that's what they feel is happening, because I know that this state in particular puts that pressure on kids a lot. You have third graders who should be coming to school to experience the joy of learning, who instead come to school feeling the pressure that in 7 months I'm going to have to take a test, and if I don't take that test, I'm a failure. And so we've created this of 40 years of accountability that has yet to demonstrate one measurable piece of improvement of student learning over 40 years. But we continue to double down on an accountability system. And when people call out that system, they're accused of having low expectations for kids or justifying low performance. There is nobody on this dais who justifies low performance or who believes that our kids can't do better and that we have the obligation to do better for them. But the system puts that pressure on kids, and I hope that we find ways that we don't perpetuate that.
Thank you. Trustees? Trustee Singh?
Okay.
Don't be sorry.
Okay, so thank you, Trustee Coffin.
This is a really important
This is so
topic. I mean,
important.
we're here because this is such an important topic. We're hearing from our community because this is such an important topic. This is important for our students. It's important for our district. It's important for our communities. So I don't think there's any reason to be sorry for being here, and I really appreciate the effort that everyone has made to do this. So we have a chance to talk with the superintendent as a board and so our community can get deeper information. It's
you.
complex, complicated stuff.
It absolutely
Thank you.
is. Thank you, Trustee Kaufman, for, building on the point that I was trying to make. Exactly, is like, we could find ourselves in a position where we invest a lot in Dobie, in one, for school year, but then I think I would have to approve a charter operator for the next year, because I would never want to put the future of the entire district on the backs of students at a campus. Like, I can't imagine that scenario. So let's say that pans out. Then we're in a situation where our kids have to go through two major disruptions in a very short period of time. One is during the restart that we do, and then the next one is with the charter operator that comes in. And I don't like that at all. I would not want that as a parent. I don't think that's fair to our kids. But that's the only option I would actually see on this path. This does not mean I don't believe we need to invest in the schools that are struggling. In fact, it's the opposite. And the reason I asked about the money earlier is like, okay, let's say if we were to do an 1882 partnership immediately with Dobie, and I heard from Dr. Reach that there would not be a lot of additional cost, in a sense that the state would be putting more money. That frees up money for us to invest in that same community. Like, imagine if we had a summer program this summer where we took the 250 kids who are not reading at Dobie on grade level and taught them all how to read. That is an additional investment in that community, and it is leveraging funds that would come from the state. And it would, in my mind, it would reduce the long-term risk a lot. And we have to view this as just a short turnaround time. We would eventually get the school back in our hands to do with as we please once the school would go through a turnaround period with an 1882 partnership. So, this is something that we've all been thinking about this, but I think it's really important that we really put ourselves in that mindset a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and how we can make sure that every dollar that we put is put into the students who need it the most, and that we're leveraging as many dollars as we can from the state, because unfortunately, we don't have a lot of space thanks to the legislature's disinvestment in public education.
Thank you. Anyone else, comments or questions? Okay, I have just a clarification. You brought two options. One option that we had discussed as a board, as a community, that I know the administration was exploring when we were talking specifically about Dobie, was possible closure and moving students to an A or B ranked school. Lamar was discussed and a community meeting was held, and I don't see that here. Can you clarify just kind of your thinking and make it really clear for the community kind of where you are in terms of the recommendations you're exploring right now, and why that is or is not one of them?
Yeah, so that is one aspect of a reassignment, right? So for one school. And so the path that we laid out, path A and B, do not consider reassignments. This is based on the feedback that we heard from the Dobie community. This is feedback that we've heard from our board and other community members. And then when you think about, the execution risk, I always think about everything we do is going to either add a risk or take a risk away from everything, from all of it. And so now, we're at a point where we don't have as much time to prepare the receiving schools as we did, several weeks ago. So those opportunities come and go, and as time progresses, you have fewer and fewer of them. So at this point, the relocation of any students from Dobie is not a current recommendation from the administration.
Thank you. And I think in terms of balancing risk for any individual school, a reassignment of that school is a pretty sure thing in terms of state accountability.
That's correct.
But perhaps a less sure thing in terms of growth of students. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for balancing our risk as a district versus supporting students who need additional academic support?
I think So there was a document I shared with the board, and we have it as a working document where we go through and analyze every scenario, and we evaluate different types of risks. There's budget risk, execution risk, there's intervention risk, and you're exactly right. As I said before, if the Dobie student population would be blended with an A or B school, and that A or B school would have a higher student population, and so mathematically and based on student performance, the accountability rating applied to that school after one full school year has a high probability of being a C or better. And because that A, B, or C is assigned to the school that those students came from, then that would effectively break the accountability chain. So from a intervention risk perspective, that is a lower risk. It's a higher probability of it occurring. These are kind of manage the community, student movement, like the things that we have always valued and things that we've talked about. And so this is a little more of an investment into our school communities, acknowledging that in years past, movement of students was done to break chains, which is effectively what was done with sixth grade at Martin and Mendez. What we're saying here is it's going to be scary, it's going to be hard, but we have a path to actually do it ourselves and do it well. Now doing 3 of them, it's going to be tough, but there is also that 1882 opportunity if things don't appear to be moving in the right direction. So I tried to present a strategy that takes all of this into consideration and then risk adjust it to give you an option at the end if things aren't going well. And I do want to point out, like, each school has its own culture, each school has its own performance, each school has progressed and done so many different things well. And so the probability of each one of them getting to a D, C, or better is different. And you can kind of see that based on the data we've shared. So hopefully that was helpful in the way I clarified it.
That is helpful, thank you. And I have just not all Fs are created equal. And if we could go back and look really quickly at slides, I think it's 5, 6, and 7, the each.
Like 59 for web.
Yes, exactly. When you look at 2023, for example, for Dobie, went from a 59 under the old accountability system, in 2022 a 51 under the new accountability system. We would hope we would see that number going up as we see the investments that the administration has made with the board's support reflected. I do really appreciate you detailing a lot of those supports for our communities, because if you're not on those campuses, you don't know. And we have been doing the work to shift investment to our highest need schools, and I understand that it is paying off. We know we've seen the climate and culture you've told us you're seeing in the data, but if we've seen it go from 51 to 46 on that overall score, for example, and I know Webb, Burnett's went up overall 23 to 24, Dobie's and Webb's went down 23 to 24. Do you feel, I don't know where you think we're going to be on 25 for those, but do you feel like the trends have returned to the right direction and we'll be able to get where we need to be?
Yeah, so what I would say is when you have a system as large as we are, and you think about all the things that we're competing for resources in 23, 24, 22, and 23 even, and what we've done, effectively 23-24 was first year of a lot of things, right? And oh, by the way, we were also doing a lot of professional development around special education. Like 24-20, there's a lot that went in. And so when you think about, okay, how does that time compete for professional development around curriculum, or how does that time compete for other things? So, there was a lot happening in those 2 years. And so, we always talk about inputs, outputs, and outcomes. The inputs have been deployed, right? We're seeing outputs move, and you would expect lagging outcomes to move. These schools, we have all of them were principals that we hired in this iteration of the administration. And so, there's a lot there. I expect these to continue to move in the right direction. Each one is going to have its own nuance, certainly. I don't want to maybe speak to, like kind of the downward turn, a couple points here. There's a lot of movement, student population. There's just a lot.
The big picture that I'm looking for, that you feel like we're moving in the right direction.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And then I think the one other question I have, we're about to launch into a consolidation process with some school closures because of our budget tightness, our loss of students. We've talked for a long time about middle schools being a place where we're just not serving our students as well as we could and should. We know that's where we lose a lot of enrollment. It's where a lot of our, historically, even under the old system, where a lot of our struggles with accountability have been. We obviously see that continuing and perhaps amplifying under the new accountability system. And what doors are we closing by going down this path, by being able to consider, for example, the new model that the normal turnaround plan would have given us if we had had a year to kind of work with our community to rethink, like, what do we want these middle schools to be? How could these schools be done differently? We talked about a possible pre-K model or a possible, what doors are we closing right now with that, either now or for a while?
Yeah, I would say that it's a function of time, and Jacob can certainly chime in here, but once you start an action, a turnaround action, and it's approved, you have to execute that action. So the 2-year duration, even if you meet accountability in year 1, you have to actually see out the plan itself. So if that's the case, then effectively what we would do is 25, 26, 26, 27, and then any action that the board wanted to take or the administration regarding, program design or closure, whatever, really all actions would occur after that time. So the accountability chain would have to be broken and the plan would have to be implemented all the way through. It doesn't mean that you can't plan. It doesn't mean that you can't work towards it. We certainly would be doing that, but you would not be able to do anything until that had been completed.
Okay, thank you. And I know we have a history of breaking the chain and falling right back. And I think this board and administration and I think our community take very seriously the need to not break the chain for the sake of breaking the chain, but break the chain and create something stronger for our students on the other side that's going to serve people better. And I think those conversations, knowing kind of what the limits and what the possibilities are, is helpful. Thank you. Trustees, any additional questions? Okay. We will now recess the open meeting at 2:43 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071. When we're finished with the executive session, we will briefly return to formally adjourn the meeting. The adjournment will be recorded and included in all replays of today's meeting. There's no vote, nothing else coming. So thank you for joining us today, and have a good afternoon and a good weekend. Thank you all. Okay, we are now reconvening the open meeting at 4:09 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Meeting is adjourned at 4:10 p.m. Thank you.